There is a difference between the truth and what is often reported in the news. Understanding and learning about media bias and media literacy will help give you the tools necessary for finding the truth in the news. First, let's dive into what media bias is. Every story is framed in a way that emphasizes or obscures specific features of the story to create a certain narrative. The reality of the situation is what the storyteller makes it. When the same frame is used to capture different people, events, and issues, crafting a selective reality, there is a bias present. The purpose this bias serves depends on its type, partisan or non-partisan. Partisan bias involves the media favoring or disfavoring a major political party, usually to shine one party in a better light than the other. After all, when it comes to politics, people want to consume media that reinforces their ideals and attacks their opponents. The consumer's desires are reflected in the media as partisan biases, specifically confirmation bias and disconfirmation bias. Confirmation bias can be defined as follows: the tendency to search for information that is congruent with one's predisposition while avoiding incongruent information. We can think of this bias in the context of the 2016 presidential election. A conservative, Republican Trump supporter would want to hear good news about Donald Trump's campaign and poll numbers. They would want to avoid criticism, scandalous stories, or negative election predictions involving Trump. On the other hand, they would want to hear criticism, scandalous stories, or negative election predictions involving Hillary Clinton. They would want to hear bad news about her campaign and poll numbers. This person is then likely to turn to conservative news sources, for example, when inquiring about this election. The network will confirm their consumers' biased opinions to maintain their audience, telling conservatives only what they want to hear. Disconfirmation bias, on the other hand, is defined as the tendency to spend more effort counter-arguing attitudinally incongruent than congruent arguments. We can think of this bias in the context of the recent overturning of Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court. When the general public discuss why abortion rights should be formally legalized and protected, there is more focus on why the other side is wrong than why your side is right. In pro-life supporters' social media posts, they more heavily focus on why a pro-choice world is sinful, dangerous, inhumane, and wrong. In pro-choice supporters' social media posts, they focus mostly on why a pro-life world is cruel, inconsiderate, violating, and wrong. The stance each side takes is centered around its hate for the opposition more than its belief in its values. People are more likely to create a whole Twitter thread dedicated to their anger than retweet posts that share their opinion. While the majority of major news outlets are relatively moderate on the political scale, meaning partisan bias is very prominent in media, it is still important to ensure your media diet is well-rounded. A variety of political perspectives allow you to see both sides of a story, so you know the whole truth. Now, let's take a look at non-ideological biases in the media. There are 6 major types, and each one feeds off and builds upon the others. First, availability heuristic. The mental shortcut where we make decisions based on emotional cues, familiar facts, and vivid images that leave an easily recalled impression in our minds. Next, representativeness heuristic. A mental shortcut that we use when estimating probabilities. When we're trying to assess how likely a certain event is, we often make our decision by assessing how similar it is to an existing mental prototype. Then, framing effects. The cognitive bias wherein an individual's choice from a set of opinions is influenced more by how the information is worded than by the information itself. Then, anchoring and insufficient adjustment, a cognitive heuristic where a person starts off with an initial idea and adjusts their beliefs based on this starting point. Anchoring and insufficient adjustment have been shown to produce erroneous results where the initial anchor deviates from the true value. Then, overconfidence, a cognitive bias characterized by an overestimation of one's actual ability to perform a task successfully by a belief that one's performance is better than that of the others, or by excessive certainty in the accuracy of one's beliefs. Lastly, motivated reasoning, a form of reasoning which people access construct, and evaluate arguments in a biased fashion to arrive at or endorse a preferred conclusion. Keep these biases, both partisan and non-partisan, and their impact on a story in mind as we turn to media literacy. Media literacy is the concept that expands on our current definition of literacy. Media literacy is the ability to discern between different types of media, decode media messages, examine the impact of media on yourself, and thoughtfully create media. Media literacy involves all formats of media because the media we consume is no longer restricted to simple newspaper articles. The variety of media today requires a new kind of understanding. The nature of different media platforms encourages different media content. Posts on Instagram will detail personalized, polished stories about individuals' social lives. In stark contrast to that, major news stories on CNN's website will detail national, dramatized, possibly left-leaning stories about the country's current state. Being media literate means you would notice the differences between these platforms and adjust how well or in what ways you let the content inform you. You would also know whether or not to internalize and therefore be impacted by this media. Media literacy empowers you to make better choices when it comes to the media you consume. If you recognize the motivation behind a piece of media, the bias skewing the perspective presented, then you can fully understand that media. That knowledge can help minimize the influence the media has over you. In turn, your production of media content is more conscientious. Now that you understand the different types of media biases and the importance of media literacy, you are well on your way to finding the truth in the news.